So I've got the wired mic today. Let me explain. So basically, for the last 2 days, so Friday and Saturday, I've been in Falkirk in Scotland, talking about you guys mainly, about a renewed parish and the culture that we need to build in order to grow a parish and seek out the lost who need to be found by Jesus Christ. So that's what I've been doing for the last 2 days. And the Friars of Evernuru generally generously offered to cover me for the whole weekend. So this is kind of like a little bit of a holiday for me. But then I remembered that we're in the middle of a preaching series, right? We're in the middle of our Christmas gymnasium. So what I'm doing now is keeping that series going, and because it's being filmed on YouTube, it means that anyone who's not at this Mass can always catch up. So that's why I'm here. So, just to update you, remember we started 2 weeks ago, didn't we? 3 weeks ago, of our 8-week Christmas gymnasium by addressing the issue of correct form. So in order to be physically prepared to do exercise, you have to adopt the right stance of humility, as we saw the tax collector before God in the temple. And you also, very boringly but very importantly, have to focus on diet. Diet is 75% of a workout. If you're not doing the right things, if you're not getting the right food, then like me, you just get flabbier and flabbier no matter how many weights you lift. And so it is for us in the spiritual life. It doesn't matter how many prayers we do or how many good works we do, if they're not matched by our commitment to God in all areas of our life. If we're not saying no to the right things or to the wrong things and yes to the right things, then we're always going to lag behind. So now, week 3, we're into our preparation exercises, our spiritual preparation exercises. So what's one of the key things we have to remember if we're going to be able to keep our exercise up? It's one of the most boring aspects of exercise, but it's one that we have to do. Like if we're going to wake up in the morning and not be in lots of pain and be ready to exercise again, it's that word, stretching. If you don't stretch, then you'll be like me. You go to the gym, you feel good, you think, I feel really powerful, and the next morning you're like, I'm in so much pain. And therefore, that puts you off the next exercise. If you're not stretching yourself constantly, if you don't make up a habit of stretching yourself, then things start to go awry. And in fact, I think the readings this week actually point us to a different kind of stretching, a spiritual stretching which equips us for the challenges of life that we face, that actually prepare us for the theme of this week's gospel and the first reading, for resurrection. Now, I believe in the resurrection, obviously because I'm a Christian, but I experience it every day. To have the courage and the power to get out of my bed when it's freezing cold, when I'm tired, and it's completely dark. You ever have that feeling the alarm goes off and you just hate life for about a minute? You just, oh my gosh. But somehow you summon up that power. You summon up that strength to get out of bed. Why? We all have different reasons. Maybe like the kids need to be prepared for school. You need to go to work to feed your family. Wherever it is, there's a reason and a purpose, and so you get up out of bed. There's a motivation, and if you're exercising, actually, then maybe you're getting up to do your stretches. There's a reason and a motive which gives us a belief in a life which isn't sedate, a life which is real, a life that we can work towards. In this life, it's resurrection, and it prepares us for the next life, which is resurrection. And our readings are all about how we prepare and how we give ourselves the fortitude to prepare for that life. We need to stretch ourselves. Now, in Paul's reading to the Thessalonians in the second reading, he says this. He says, may the Lord turn your hearts towards the love of God, and the fortitude of Christ. The fortitude. What does that word mean? It means strength, but not just strength as in physical strength, but the ability to endure. It says in the book of Hebrews, for the hope which lay in the future, Jesus willingly suffered for us. We are called to be possessed of a spiritual fortitude, which doesn't just consist in one-off acts of kindness, of being Christian in one moment, but actually exercising ourselves each and every moment by our habits in order to respond to the challenges which we expect, and particularly for the challenges that we don't expect in life. And we see this in the first reading, the book of Maccabees. The story here is one of the stories of courage and bravery and fortitude that we've not heard anywhere else in the Bible. The Maccabees are men and women who are under persecution. They are being forced by the powers that be at the time to forsake their faith, to participate in practices which would insult the God of Israel. And there is no more insulting practice for an Israelite, no more symbolic insult to the God of Israel than of eating pork. And the powers that be say to these 7 men in the first reading, just eat some pork and we won't kill you. What gives them the courage to say no? Number one, it's their belief in the resurrection. They believe in a life which is higher than this one. They believe in an ideal which goes much further than earthly convenience. They believe in it so deeply that they are willing to sacrifice their lives rather than to have their spiritual, religious and personal integrity challenged. And so the third son actually puts out his tongue and says, cut it off, because I'd rather lose my tongue than betray the Lord my God. How did they get the strength and fortitude to do this? I mean, we can imagine ourselves in that situation. How did they suffer through it? It didn't happen in that moment. It happened with each and every single exercise of every day. The willingness to get up in the morning, to go about their daily tasks, to pray to their God, to obey the law, to live each and every moment in service to the God, to never relent in the small and basic daily tasks of life, all in honour of God. That's the only way we grow and improve. If we think that one act of heroism or one brave act, like we're some comic book star, is going to make us into a saint, then we're wrong. What makes us saints is the daily grind, the daily stretching of ourselves, going a bit further every day in holiness. It's consistency, it's constancy in prayer, in kindness and in love. Not in monumental tasks, but in each and every single small act. So that when the challenge comes, when we face that challenge, we are ready, like these young men. And yet we might say to ourselves, well, okay, that's all well and good, but it's unlikely that I'm going to be martyred for my faith in Custom House, Beckton and Silvertown, North Woolwich. I mean, you never know, but it's unlikely, right? It's unlikely we're going to be martyred or killed for our faith. But that doesn't mean that we don't face martyrdom. It doesn't mean that we don't face challenges to our integrity and to our life of faith each and every single day, to our belief in the resurrection. Because while dying like this may be heroic, living is something we have to do each and every single day. And I want to point to 2 more heroes in our readings today. Those who don't get, or they don't really get mentioned much, because Jesus is talking about the guys, the Pharisees are talking about their 7 husbands, and the first reading is talking about the brave 7 men. Someone we don't really pay much attention to in the first reading is the men's mum. Now, at the start of the reading, it says the 7 men were arrested with their mother. They died, the men. Who kept living? The mum. She had to live and endure for the rest of her life the death of her 7 sons. How did she cope with that? Well, if we go a little bit beyond the first reading into the Bible, a few verses later it says this: Now the mother was to be admired above measure and worthy to be remembered by good men, who beheld 7 sons slain in the space of one day and bore it with good courage for the hope that she had in God. God forbid that any mum here should ever suffer such a fate. But in each and every one of our lives, we have to go through something, maybe not as extreme, akin as that in our lives. Because we love, because we have relationships, because we have to endure. We've all lost a relative. We've all lost someone we're close to. We've all lost a job. We've all probably had a moment in our lives where the rug has been pulled from under our feet. when the reality we once knew is not the reality we have now. It can feel like the end of the world. The mother of the Maccabee men suffered 7 ends of her world on the same day, and yet she endured. How do you think she could endure this? Upon nothing? No. Upon a life of martyrdom, of daily sacrifice, of getting up in the morning and stretching herself just a little bit more than the day before, so that she could be ready to endure. It's that stretching of ourselves, of that commitment of ourselves to our faith, which helps us to build our belief in the resurrection. So she could say to her sons who were to die, this is what you're meant to do. There is a life higher than this one, which shows us just how much worth this life is worth living, and how we know what to give it up for. Jesus says in the gospel today, God is God not of the dead, but of the living. And so for you and I, who continue to live, who continue to struggle through daily life, if we are to endure and to grow and become sons and daughters of the resurrection, let's stretch ourselves just a little bit more. Amen.
Amen.